By Richard Larson, who's a professor in the engineering school at MIT. He is an expert on waiting in line, and he's sometimes called Dr. Q. This is a topic that's very interesting to me because there's a lot of psychology that goes into how lines are set up. There's a lot of differences in terms of how lines are set up from one country to another. So let's kind of first start in the most general sense. How did you first start studying something like waiting in line?
Well, first of all, I hate to wait in line myself. That's one of the reasons I like to study it. But I'm an operations researcher, industrial engineer type person here at MIT. And for many years, I would teach the mathematics and physics of queuing, which was born about 100 years ago in Denmark by a Danish telephone engineer named Erlang. And so I would teach the mathematics, and I got all excited. I even put together the first course at MIT, graduate course on queuing. And then in the 1990s, I'm buying a red bike for my son. And I had a terrible queuing experience. It had nothing to do with the delay. It had to do with unfairness. And this unfairness of, I bought the bike, and yet 25 people after me got their goods before I got my bike. And so I was angry 3 weeks later and decided to write a proposal to NSF, National Science Foundation. They funded me. So I've been studying the psychology of queues ever since, as well as the mathematics.
So let's first talk about one of the main queuing decisions that places with multiple cash registers often make, which is, do you allow the formation of individual lines at each cash register? And in that case, each shopper sort of has to evaluate, okay, how much stuff does each person have in their shopping cart or whatever, which one do I think is moving the most quickly, versus creating one of those sort of winding or serpentine waiting lines where you simply go to the next available cash register. So question number one, does the math of it tell us which system is optimal in terms of reducing waiting times?
Okay, well, here's the interesting fact. The average waiting time in each case, assuming you jockey for queue position, so if you're in one of those multiple lines and a server becomes idle, you can switch over and make sure that they stay busy. Mm-hmm. The average waiting time is the same in both. But customer experience and customer satisfaction is way, way better for the single serpentine line compared to the multiple line queues, and that's because customers value fairness more than actually the duration of the wait. So first come, first serve in the serpentine line is now the modern thing to do in just about everywhere except supermarkets with large carts. And somebody who can invent a solution to that for supermarkets with large carts would become very wealthy very fast.
Yeah, it seems like the serpentine line, where you just go to the next available cash register, teller, whatever the case may be, it also kind of eliminates the halting power of one slow cashier, right? Because the line can continue to advance at other registers in some sense, and that probably improves sort of the experience for the customer, I would guess.
Yeah, that kind of smooths the flow. So every so many seconds or minutes you move forward, you have this experience of making progress. You're absolutely right. Now, the cashier may be slow, not because the cashier is not as talented as the others. It may be a very difficult service they're provided to a customer, and the customer may be very involved and complex. So, but you're absolutely right. That happens.
Black Friday. Black Friday is probably, I mean, unless you can suggest to me otherwise, it's probably the time where waiting in line gets the most publicity, and it involves some people waiting in line for hours, days in some cases. I think maybe we've heard about even longer than that. Do the normal psychological dynamics of lines apply to something that becomes sort of a social event like Black Friday deal getting?
Well, if I can use the word Q-tip for Black Friday, is to buy as many things as you can off the internet. And therefore, you can do it in your pajamas at 3 o'clock in the morning, at 3 o'clock in the afternoon. You can have a glass of wine next to you or a Coke or whatever. So that's my Q-tip for Black Friday. But a lot of people go there at 4 o'clock in the morning. They'll have some stores will have 5 copies of something for a nickel a piece or $1 a piece or something. So you want to have bragging rights and get that. And it is a celebratory type of queue for many people. So in these celebratory types of queues, to be seen and to make selfies of yourself and share them on Facebook in such queues is a positive experience. I'm not one of those people myself, but many people feel that way. That's, for instance, why you see lines blocks long to get the latest iPhone when Apple releases the latest iPhone. Same kind of thing for rock stars who are going to have concerts, and people will line up in tents for 3 days to get those. And that in itself is a celebratory experience.
Are there examples where the sort of unfairness of how the lines are set up is by design? And one example that I'm thinking of is airport security, where you've got the winding line for like regular airport security, and then you've got a separate entrance, and it's just a straight line in if you have TSA pre-check now. And to me, that actually seems that it is strategically prominent unfairness to show how much more, I don't know if it's prestigious or convenient or whatever it is to pay the $75 for the TSA pre-check. Is that a factor that exists elsewhere as well?
Well, full disclosure, as an owner of TSA PreCheck number.
Yeah, me too. No, I love it.
And who gets that preference? I've often noticed recently in airports, on business type flights, that the TSA PreCheck queue is longer than the other one.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, you could argue it's still better because you don't have to take your shoes off, but that's sort of a different story, yeah.
That's right. No, Disney has this too with you can buy expedited tickets a little bit more and you go to the front of the line. Starbucks and now Dunkin' Donuts have an app on your cell phone where you can call ahead, the order is placed, and you go there and you jump the queue right to the beginning. And some of these things are not perceived as unfair. I don't think the TSA PreCheck is viewed necessarily as unfair, but it depends on the context and if everyone has access to it. So if you don't have TSA PreCheck and you have an awful queuing experience, like recently many people had at the end of the storm in JFK in New York, that might motivate them to get it. So they're not excluded in getting it. But if there's some kind of, for instance, a bouncer at a bar might let their friends in and jump the queue just because they know them. That's kind of, I think that would be viewed as unfair, etc. So the question was, are there other interesting queues in other cultures?
Yeah, I mean, I know that, for example, in some large post offices in the Boston area, there's no line at all. You just take a number and stand wherever you want, right? The take a number is one possibility. But are there other ideas that other countries have come up with?
Well, for instance, the take a number now can be an app. So there are some restaurants and other services where there would be queuing, and you can join the queue as a ghost. So with the app, you want to join a queue for a restaurant that doesn't take reservations, and the app will come back and say, well, you come here in 90 minutes, and we'll have a table for you.
Sure.
And so, but basically, the physical restaurant has a queue out in front, and in a sense, you become a ghost behind the last person in that queue, and that ghost moves forward at the same speed as the rest of the physical queue. So there are those things. I just came back from 10 days in India. The queuing behavior there is quite a different culture, and queuing in China. I've been to China 5 times, Hong Kong a few times. So I guess what I say is if you examine the queuing behavior in a country or even in a city, it's a microcosm of the larger culture from which those people are where they live and they work, et cetera.
Yeah,
so,
and obviously, you're not saying any of this, but I've some experience queuing in Israel, and it's crazy. I mean, there's really no other way to explain it, and every indication is that it's definitely connected to the culture. I've been told, although I've not experienced, that the queues in both India and China also are not particularly organized. Is that fair to say?
In India, it's often survival of the fittest.
Right.
If there's a half an inch between you and the person in front of you, the person who's trying to squeeze in will view that as a big space. And it happens to be whether it's a human or cars or jitneys or rickshaws or what have you. But I think the British stand at one extreme. They say a proper British gentleman, if he gets to a place and there's nobody else there, we'll start a queue of one. A queue of one. And I have a photograph from a London newspaper, the last riots they had there, which were several years ago. You see 13 looters queued up, first come, first serve, outside of a store that they broke the window to get into, and they let one looter in at a time to take part. And then the next looter goes in. I mean, only I think in England would I experience something like this. I didn't experience it. I saw it.
No, you weren't one of the looters, of course.
No, I wasn't one of the looters.
Last thing I want to touch on, there has to be enforcement of whatever system you have by the business, right? And this is a problem that for a while US-based airlines were dealing with, which was that American had boarding by zone and JetBlue had reverse order boarding by row or whatever the case may be, but people would ignore it and just crowd the gate. And there it is, it's imperative that whoever is running the line stick to the rules, right?
That is correct. And I've seen this more and more frequently recently. If somebody who's in Group 6 tries to go up in Group 4 and they scan their boarding pass, whether it's electronic or paper, they'll be saying, I'm sorry, you have to wait for Group 6. So I've seen more and more of that enforcement recently. If you don't have that enforcement, you're going to get chaos. And chaos can sometimes lead to queue rage, and queue rage can lead to injury. And we don't want to go there.
That's right. If people don't follow the rules, it's anarchy, and we just can't have that. That would not be good for anybody.
Right.
We've been speaking with Professor Richard Larson from MIT, known in some circles as Dr. Q. Thanks a lot for talking to us about this.
Okay, that was great. Okay, thank you, David.